Welcome to the Business of Drinks, where we go behind the bottle, interviewing beverage innovators and icons about how they built their businesses.
We take a data-driven approach, analyzing the brands, products, and categories that get customers and consumers excited.
And we cover several drinks categories, from wine, beer, and spirits to non-alcoholic drinks, as well as THC, adaptogen, and functional beverages.
So whether you're working in drinks or just interested in the stories behind your favorite brands, join us each week as we explore how companies are unlocking growth at every stage in the game.
Thanks for joining us, and let's dive in. Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today, we're talking about a winery that's not only weathering the shifting wine landscape, but actively growing and evolving with consumer preferences. We are, of course, talking about La Crema, and we're sitting down with Shilah Salmon, the Senior Vice President of Marketing at Jackson Family Wines, to discuss how she's using data-driven marketing, strategic partnerships, and community-building practices to move La Crema forward.
La Crema is a 40-year-old brand that has grown from a small boutique winery into a million-case powerhouse, all while staying committed to cool climate, estate-driven wines. And in an era where the overall U.S. wine market declined 3.5% by volume last year, La Crema is proving its resilience, holding strong within the $15 and up category alongside other top-performing brands.
And this is not happenstance. Under Shilah's leadership, La Crema has doubled down on targeted consumer insights, finding new audiences and new ways to engage them. According to brand data from Numerator, 69% of La Crema buyers in the past year were new to the brand. Even more impressive, 14% were new to wine altogether. This means that La Crema isn't just maintaining its base, it's actively bringing new consumers into the wine category fold.
Totally. And a big part of their success comes from meeting consumers where they are. So La Crema has taken an out-of-the-box approach to wine marketing. They show up outside of traditional wine spaces. So they're not just focusing on wine events, they're bringing the brand out to pride celebrations, high-end art festivals, and even sporting events like the Kentucky Derby and the Head of the Charles Regatta.
And it's not just in real life. They will actively meet and engage you online as well, right? They are going to find consumers in the spaces and places they inhabit digitally. I was on their Instagram page earlier, and I saw a collaborative post that was a paid partnership, not with a wine store or a tasting event, but a vintage furniture store in Washington, D.C., where I live. And in this video, a woman is setting up a beautiful new, restored teak cabinet with wine glasses and such. And she finishes her decorating by popping a bottle of La Crema Cabernet Sauvignon. I felt like I was watching HGTV, and I was not mad about it. These small details really matter. You visit their website, and their second social media site that you can go to is not Instagram even, it's Pinterest, because that's where folks are getting ideas and inspiration around lifestyle.
Yeah, and it's not just where, but also who La Crema is seeking to forge bonds with. Their WNBA partnership is a prime example of how Shilah and her team are rethinking wine branding. By aligning with this diverse, younger audience that values representation and belonging, La Crema is challenging the stereotype that wine is just for traditional drinkers in vineyard settings.
Beyond branding, beyond marketing, La Crema is also evolving its portfolio, right? It's long been known as a Pinot Noir and Chardonnay producer, but the brand is expanding into new varieties like Sauvignon Blanc and, as I mentioned, even Cabernet Sauvignon. And despite initial pushback internally, the numbers show that this strategy is really resonating. It's working. The brand's new Cabernet Sauvignon release sold out almost immediately to its wine club members.
Yeah, and let's talk about data. So, one of the most compelling things about this conversation is how Shilah uses real consumer insights to make strategic moves. She talks about wine's leaky bucket problem. So, the industry is bringing in new consumers, but losing even more at the same time. So, her goal is really to keep those new drinkers engaged through better storytelling, digital strategy, and product innovation.
So, if you're interested in how a legacy wine brand adapts, grows, and stays relevant in the changing market, this episode is packed with insights you won't want to miss.
Let's get into it. Here's our conversation with Shilah Salmon, SVP of Marketing at Jackson Family Wines. And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks.
Shilah, thanks so much for coming on the Business of Drinks.
Yeah, it's really nice to be here. Thank you for having me. I think we've tried a few times and now is the time.
Yay, we made it happen. Well, for listeners who may not be aware of the backstory, I know that I talked a little bit about La Crema recently on one of our last call segments, just about the success story of this brand. And I heard Shilah talk at SomCon, really painting a picture of how La Crema has not just maintained, but really grown its share across a very diverse set of consumer audiences. And the case study of La Crema really underscored for me a couple things. Like, one, just how important data is, especially when the market is tight and down for a lot of brands, to really have data that can help paint both the big picture and help brands understand where the opportunities are. And I think also another big thing was just how important it is to keep reaching out to new audiences. So, Shilah, we will have so much to discuss.
Yeah.
So, let's start out. Tell me about your role at Jackson Family Wines and your background before taking that job.
Yeah. I've been doing wine marketing for 20 years now, which is wild to say out loud. I started managing Constellation and Robert Mondavi's portfolio outside of the US for years. So I worked in the global market and the global landscape. And that's kind of where I cut my teeth. So I saw the international wine trade, how dynamic it was, and how wonderful it was. I mean, I completely fell in love, and I knew that's kind of what I wanted to do with the rest of my life, is work in wine marketing. I love the marketing side because we get to work all the way through with the vineyard folks, through to who drinks it in the end and how the wine ends up in the glass. And so it's a beautiful way to approach the business. So I worked for Constellation for 7 years, mainly ran Robert Mondavi, and then came over to Jackson Family to build their luxury portfolio, which was called the Spire Collection at the time. And so I was hired to build Cardinal and La Coya and La Joda, the wines of Chris Carpenter. And then we built a really nice group of brands there with the Jackson family, with Barbara Benke at the helm. And then in the last 5 years, I've taken over La Crema and then Kendall Jackson and a lot of the more commercial sides of Jackson Family Wines. And so I have a really nice breadth of knowledge from the high-end luxury all the way through to the commercial wines. But I think one of the beautiful things about my career, and I always say this as a marketer, is I've never had to make anything up. I've always had really, really good quality wine to tell the story of, no matter what the price point is. And I find right now that story and those insights and that information is just really helpful for the wine business, and how we kind of navigate these choppy waters. Lately, since actually March of last year now, Erica, we've been leading a charge called Beyond the Headlines. And so Karen Danon, who heads up my research and insights department, and myself, we speak with journalists, we speak on panels, we speak with wine and spirits associations, we speak with distributors, we train salespeople. We are out there trying to help people use data and information and facts to understand what's actually happening with the wine business. So therefore, they can find the opportunity within that. Because what we found last March was we were getting to this kind of moment of paralysis. Like, people were so overwhelmed by the headlines and the negative information they were getting that they didn't know how to act. And so we kind of come in, we use real information. It is not always a rosy, pretty picture, but we help
Sure.
people understand what is actually really happening, and then help people kind of go forward in that. And it very much comes from the owners of my company saying, hey, rising tide floats all boats, and like, we can't let this thing go down. And
Yeah.
personally, I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm not about to let the wine industry falter. I've put a huge percent of my life into it. I live in the Napa Valley. This is my community. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit of where I was, and then how I got here to this point of talking on things like this, and kind of coining myself the wine industry therapist.
I mean, I feel like that is a role that is needed at this time, and you are doing an amazing job, because
Thank
after
you.
I saw you talk at SomCon, your session was really, the talk of the afternoon, of people saying like, "Hey, maybe there are opportunities here that we haven't considered, and things that we can do to help lift our brand." Thank you for that work that you're
Yeah.
doing. Let's dial into La Crema a bit. So, for listeners who aren't as familiar with the brand, can you talk through, the brand's history and what its key attributes and values are?
Yeah. So La Crema's been around for over 40 years. La Crema existed before the Jackson family purchased it. They took it from a pretty small winery to now over 1 million cases. La Crema spans around a $15 bottle up to about a $75 bottle. Our foundations were always on cool coastal vineyards focused on Chardonnay and Pinot Noir for years and years. So for a couple of decades, those were really our drivers. And then we slowly expanded into things like Pinot Gris. And then in the last few years, we have stepped into Sauvignon Blanc, and now most recently into Cabernet. But I think a thing with La Crema, one, we own almost all of our vineyards. So it's really a story of estate. We farm everything sustainably. We're certified sustainable. All of our vineyards are. And I think when we look at La Crema's success, I've now been working on it for 4 years solidly. And we look back, we have so many loyal drinkers, and it's because we've never faltered on quality, like ever faltered. And we have chosen in years to make less wine. Maybe we've had to raise the price a little bit because we've had less wine to sell, but we'd rather make less wine than falter on quality. And I think that our drinkers know that, and they trust us for that. So I think that that's a huge part of La Crema's success, is its loyalist. People can count on it. And I think that is a big part of this shift now in the wine business, is that for a while, because there wasn't this proliferation of choice in beverage alcohol, right? It was wine, beer, and spirits. You could give people mediocre quality wine and they would drink it because they didn't have a lot
Yeah.
of choices, right? And now we have so many choices, and people want things that taste good, that make them feel good. The quality is so important. And so I think that is, this moment that we're in, is people are drinking less, they're moderating overall, but they want better quality, they know better. And I think in the past, people were drinking wine because it was sometimes just an option that they had. And so I think, one of our calls to action for the industry is just like, we got to keep making good wine and keep
Yeah.
delivering better quality wine to bring people in. But La Crema has, starting probably 12 or 15 years ago, taken some pretty strong stances on its values. And I think that has shown. We started sponsoring San Francisco Pride, the Gay Men's Choir of San Francisco, running ads in LGBTQ plus magazines 12, 15 years ago.
Wow.
And we were farming sustainably 12 and 15 years ago. And so we were standing on something more than just the product. And the last 5 or 6 years, we've taken a really big stance in that. And I think that really shows too, because people do now believe that their purchase is more powerful than their vote in some cases. And so
Yeah.
you have to give people a reason to trust your brand and love your brand and hit where the values matter. And so I think that's something that we've never faltered away from. So we've stood for something a little bit deeper, I think, than just what's in the bottle. And this last year, we just signed a partnership with the WNBA, which is a huge, for me as a feminist, studied women's studies in college, to
Yeah.
sponsor the WNBA is a huge deal. And so those things I think are really resonating with people and getting people excited about what wine can offer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's talk a little bit about the product set. So you mentioned the new edition of the Cabernet Sauvignon. Tell me what drove the addition of that SKU. And I ask because,
Yeah.
I have long known largely the Pinot Noir and the Chardonnay, and then was like surprised to see the Cabernet Sauvignon pop up. So I wanted to talk about that rationale.
Yeah. So we started to put our toe in with the Bordeaux varieties with Sauv Blanc. So about 5 or 6 years ago, we wanted to meet the palate of our loyal drinkers where they were. And so there's been a lot of shifts in how America eats and how it drinks, and eating is really important, right? And the number one food in the US used to be Italian food, and now it's shifted to Mexican food. Asian cuisines are very big. And so Sauvignon Blanc was like a natural progression to follow our folks, right? As they shift the way they eat, we've gotten to Sauvignon Blanc. And by no means was that an easy decision, right? Like I pause because I remember the debates around the table of, but that's not who we are. We're Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. We're Burgundian, right?
Yeah.
But the reality is that to our folks, we're just quality wine. Like
Right.
we're quality, we're something they can count on. We have a house style that is textured, that is layered, that they know. So we did that in Sauv Blanc. And then when it got to Cabernet, we, as the Jackson family, own just incredible Cabernet vineyards around Sonoma County, which is our home. A lot of hillsides, a lot of mountainside vineyards. And so we thought, could we take our assets and make a Cabernet that meets La Crema's style, its house style? And we tried for 2 years to try and do that. And then with the V22, Vintage 22, we just released it this last fall, and we're thrilled. So we have created this Cabernet that is structured, that has power, but it's elegant, it's layered. We'll have to get you a bottle. I don't know if you've tasted it, but you will go, oh yeah, that makes sense for La Crema to do something like that.
Nice.
And it's a higher priced Cabernet. Will probably never make more than 20,000 cases, right? It's
Uh-huh.
just small. And it's just to keep La Crema also in that conversation and have our folks come along with us. And we put the Cabernet out to our wine club and our email list, and it sold out very quickly.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and I think it comes back to some of the macro stuff that we're talking to the industry about, which is we have to get out of our own way sometimes, right? Like we love our rules.
Especially in the wine industry. My
We
goodness, we're all about the rules.
we love our rules, but our drinkers don't. And sometimes the rules are off-putting to them. And so they're like, why don't you make a Cabernet? Like,
Sure,
why
sure.
don't you make a Sauvignon Blanc, right? And so I think it's also that just evolution for us, and one being able to also own the supply, I think is super important. But it's evolving. And I think that our drinkers are evolving. And when you say Burgundian varieties to our young Gen Z and younger millennial drinkers, they have no idea what you're talking about.
Sure. Yeah.
And do they want to know? In some cases, no. Like what's more important is pleasure and enjoyment versus education. And so we need to kind of meet them in that, I think. And so take down a little bit of those barriers that we have set up. And so I think La Crema has been trying it out. But I'll tell you, like, none of it's easy, right? All of it is like, old guard, new guard, like arguing for our drinker versus the institution. And I think that's constant with us.
Sure. I mean, and I think, it's test and learn, test and learn. And I know that Jackson Family is very data-driven organization, which I think is, like I've said, the way forward
Yeah.
to really understand, what is happening there and how can we find those opportunities. So, tell me a little bit about the target La Crema consumer or multiple consumer bases. Like, what are you thinking of when you're thinking of this target demographic and psychographic of this the consumer who is a loyalist to this brand?
Yeah, that's a huge question, Erica.
It is, I know.
Because there's so many. There are
Yeah.
so many folks that we have to talk to now. And the marketing mix, I used to say it was always a circle and it was like six, there were like six things in it, right? And if you hit on all those six and you hit your targets, you were doing great. Now there's like 30 things in your mix.
Wow.
And you have to use all of those different tools to talk to all different kinds of people. And so I think when I think about our target, instantly my head goes to all of these buckets and I see it in buckets and then moments, the moments how I reach them. And do I reach them with traditional tools or do I reach them with new tools that are more digitally and socially focused? How do I reach them in store where I used to, or now is it online grocery? So it's all different. And I think that's where the whole wine industry has to accept that is changing. And spirits, beer, functional beverages, they are winning in these new parts of the marketing mix. They are
Totally.
winning in the digital and social space. They are telling consumers exactly what they want to hear, where they want to hear it, in literally the moment they want to hear it. Like the
Yeah.
moment at the end of the day when I pick up the phone, I can target you an ad, knowing that pretty much it's a likely moment you're going to drink something. And so whoever hits that moment is going to win, right?
Yeah.
And it's crazy, but it is the landscape. And I think wine has been pretty hesitant to go that far, that fast, but we just have to. And so for La Crema, I think about my drinker. One, we love our drinkers. Like they love us and we love them. It is this beautiful relationship. And we will never go away from events as a huge part of our strategy. Standing behind a table, pouring in front of folks, bringing them in, seeing that little sparkle in their eye, like that's the beauty. And that's kind of where you learn the most about your drinker. I ask for the wine industry right now, please stop going to wine events. Go,
Interesting.
go to the events where wine is not and bring wine, because this is part of what we've learned is that when we take La Crema on the road and we go to where we're the only wine brand, we have incredible impact. So we have a La Crema tour that we take around. I have a set that lives in the back of a semi truck. I drive it around to about 12 stops a year. And this last year, which just ended in November with Palm Springs Pride, we poured free samples for 80,000 people last year
Wow.
on that
That's
tour.
incredible.
It is, and it is worth every penny. But what we're doing is we're going to events where there aren't a bunch of wineries in that moment, and you're surprising people, you're delighting them, you're giving them wine in a moment that they're already having an emotional experience. So that tour, for example, this is a really big part of our marketing strategy, is just to get people to taste, because we know if they taste, they'll stay with us. We go to pride events, we go to high-end art events, and then we go to high-end sporting events. So we go to tennis events, rowing events. We go to an event called Expo Chicago, and we do Miami Pride, San Francisco Pride. We're doing World Pride this year, Palm Springs Pride. We've gone to Cincinnati Pride. So we go into things outside of the wine bubble, and we pour wine for people. And usually it's complimentary. And I will tell you, our finance people hate it. But in the end, I think it's worth it, because we're just letting people taste and sink in and have a moment.
Yeah.
And then the digital side, right now for La Crema and for every wine brand, it's just making sure that you're everywhere that information is being pulled from, so that your SEO is set up correctly on your website, that when people go to online shop, that your products look good, that you have beautiful pictures, that you have videos that make them happy. Like when they go, it's like if you go shopping and you go to Amazon or you go to your favorite, to Nordstrom, there's so much dynamism involved in buying a product. wine has to do that. It's no longer bottle shots, right? It's
Yeah.
videos, it's humans telling stories, it's virtual tasting notes. And so just making sure that your identity digitally is very, very strong. And social
Yeah.
media is for sure part of that, but it's not everything, right? It's got to be kind of the whole 360. And then when we think about like our like millennial drinkers, so our younger millennial and our older millennial, they have a really nice amount of disposable income. So we love our young Gen Z. They're outstanding. But I know when I was that age, I did not have a lot of money to buy a nice bottle of wine.
For sure.
And
Yeah.
and so we have to, as an industry, bring them in, but we cannot expect that that generation is going to be buying all of the wine that we need to, keep this thing moving. And so
Right.
I think that millennial, that younger and that older millennial are a really great group to target, and you have to just meet them where they are. And we always say it's a really good one for the wine industry is when you ask drinkers, they think of wine as like it's their slow beverage. It's their beverage for their slow moments. It's a lower energy beverage. And what we're trying to do right now is get wine out of that. Doesn't have to be just when you're sitting two people at a dining table. It doesn't have to be in a quiet restaurant. Wine can be at basketball games, at pride events, at music festivals. We need to shift that perspective that wine is a low energy beverage into a high energy beverage. And so whether that's what you show in your imagery or where you show up, right? I think that's where you can win. And, often some people say about La Crema, well, you guys have so much money and you can do all of these big things. And in reality, what we don't for the wine industry, because the wine industry never has big margins, but you it doesn't cost a lot of money sometimes to do these events. It's just like being there and having wine, because
Right.
wine is the value, right? Wine
Yeah.
has
Yeah.
so much value. And so I think that's a big one for me is like, just pick up the phone and start asking.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's fascinating because I think, brands do think like, oh, this is just, like maybe they have like a huge marketing budget and a big team and whatever. But I think a lot of what I have observed of La Crema is just, it seems like very strategic thinking and really like sticking with those ideas for the long run. Like one thing that I see a lot of brands do, especially newer brands, is okay, we have like a marketing campaign and we're like going in this direction and they're sort of moving in another direction, and there's just a lack of consistency and clarity about like how do these campaigns further the long-term strategy here, how do they convey the values and attributes of the brand and build an audience that appreciates those sorts of things. So I'm curious, like, what advice do you have for brands to approach their marketing strategies? I mean, I think you are literally probably
Yeah.
one of the best people in the industry to answer this question. How is it that a brand should approach its marketing strategy?
Yeah. I think how you started this is so right on with just like where we are as a society and a culture right now. Like we kind of have culturally induced ADHD. you know, we like hit something hard, we want it to work, we want to see results, and then we want to move on to the next cool thing, right? And like
Yeah.
that is where we are now. And it is, I think that it's that way with campaigns, it's that way with products. It's like, man, you want to throw that thing against the wall and then you want to see something happen within a year or two. And I think the reality for wine, for our world, is things are slower. They are slower, right? And you have to take your time and you have to commit. And I think so on the long term side, I think the long term part is it's very important because people can find out everything about you now on their phone.
Yeah.
And they see if you're wishy washy. And if they see you not committing, right, then they're going to question your values. And so you have to stick to those strategies. I think when I think about for like if I was doing something new or say I had something small and I was going to build it over the long term, like we have this I'm going to give away so many funny things, but we had this thing when we were building the luxury portfolio of Jackson Family called Where's Your Reno?
Uh-huh.
And so Where's Your Reno is Reno is a city that the wine industry never pays attention to. Like, nobody goes to Reno. But there's an incredible amount of wealth there. There's this budding food community. There's all live music. There's so many things. And so the task, this was probably like 7 or 8 years ago, was for our teams to find your Reno. What's that market? And then go in all in. Go all
Nice.
in.
Yeah.
Take your winemakers there. Build relationships with your retailers. Get in with the travel community. Like, sponsor a music festival. Go and find your Reno. And I think in wine, we love the beautiful, fancy things, but we end up with a bunch of ourselves. And so it's like kind of going in and saying, I'm going to commit to these markets in a way, right? Versus just like, you can say I have a strategy for a secondary market.
Yeah.
But what is that? What does it mean, right? And like, how do you go in there and actually make a dent and build real relationships? And I think that's a really important one of like, where's your Reno? Find your Reno. Like, that was like a funny way, but to me that was more about committing to something.
Yeah.
And then I think when you're doing something new, like finding influencers outside of just like wine influencers that meet you somewhere, whether they're travel influencers, foodies, and build those relationships so that they can learn to trust your brand, talk about your brand in organic ways that feel good. It's different than just like, here's $10,000. I sponsored this influencer and I got a post.
Yeah.
What we've learned is we have now one program. It's very successful for La Crema. We cultivate a group. We call them the besties. They're wonderful. It's 12 people. We cultivate them. We've brought them along. They bond. They're influencers all across the United States, all in different secondary markets. And throughout the year, we ask them to talk about different things if it fits. And we give them different wine samples, different times of the year. We give them different topics. And so they're talking about us to their audiences in ways that feel right to them. So I think that's important. And when we talk about long-term, I'm telling you that one because those are 12 months long where we've worked on content programs versus what I think often happens in that space is, here's a check, do one thing, and that's it.
Totally. Yeah, just a one-off. I mean,
Just
that
a
makes
one-off.
so much more sense. Yeah, just to, develop that relationship over the long term
Yeah.
and then really help an audience become acquainted more in depth with a brand. I think it's such a smart idea.
Yeah, and think about your holidays, like say in the summer, I'm asking you to talk about Sauvignon Blanc, but then Thanksgiving, it's like, okay, I'm going to send you some Chardonnay and Pinot Noir. And here are some recipe ideas to take your Thanksgiving up a notch from our estate chef. Why don't you try that stuff out and see what happens, right?
Yeah.
And then they might do the sweet potato cook-off with the La Crema chef versus their grandma's recipe. You have to give people something to talk about more than just like, here's my wine, it's great.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Something that's engaging. And
right. Like, how does this fit into my life? Like, I think just that's the thing that I think I see missing from a lot of wine marketing that I think La Crema has done so well is help make it very clear, how does this thing fit into my life? And like introducing products for a range of experiences that are like outside of that table just makes such a difference. Like, I love the WNBA tie-in of like, okay, yeah, this is the wine for basketball games. Like, that's a fantastic example of, yes, wine at this sporting event.
Yep.
Makes a lot of sense.
And the wine I think for La Crema specifically, it's like the wine to celebrate. Like, things are hard right now. Like, life is very hard. And what we're trying to give people permission to do is to celebrate the little things. Like, and wine is a really good way to do that. And yes, I can't say wine is an antidepressant, but I honestly believe at some level, sitting at a table with somebody you love and having a bottle of wine and talking through life can make you feel better. And and so it's just trying to help people understand that like wine should be part of celebrating the little parts of life because it is hard, and like giving people permission to say, hey, I'm going to come over with a bottle of wine, or hey, let's go to the park, let's take a bottle of wine and let's like throw out a blanket and sit down and like have a chat. And I think that it's like this balm, which is how I fell in love with the wine industry, right? It's like this balm for the things that are hard and that are like right now challenging, and it softens the edges. It allows people to talk at a deeper level. And if you don't have anything to talk about because you're so stressed out, you get to talk about what the wine tastes like.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah,
You get to like turn over the label and be like, oh wow, how cool, this is like this. And like it just softens, it softens. And I think right now we need that, and we need those like
yeah.
little moments to celebrate. And I think the WMBA, like when I started in women's studies, they had launched, I think they've been out 2 years, and we talked about the W. And it was just this like idea, right? Like women's basketball. Love that we're doing this, but like, good luck, right? What will it be? And my professor at the time was a professional athlete. And to see it, to see these women making money, getting paid, getting sponsorships, like traveling the world, like, yeah. And so like celebrate that, like
Yeah, yeah,
let's just celebrate. We got to celebrate like some of the littler things. And what we're finding with the W, which is interesting, is that most people that are W fans are not necessarily even that big of basketball aficionados. They love women's sports and big moments, cultural moments. And that
interesting.
is where we're meeting them. We're meeting
Yeah,
them in that celebration moment of, wow, look at these women and what they did.
yeah,
Right. And like,
yeah.
it's a neat place to be. And to get that insight too of like, it's just beyond basketball at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so interesting. I think that that partnership must do a lot to introduce the brand to more diverse audiences, younger audiences. I'm curious to hear you talk a little bit about what drove that partnership, and then the impact that you've seen from it so far.
Yeah. We've definitely seen an impact in the small amount of marketing that we have been able to do. I think because we don't have huge budgets to do very loud marketing, but we've been doing things since April when we launched, and we can see, I do measure new folks to La Crema every quarter, and how are they coming in, and what's their age group, what's their demographic. And I can tell you that we are reaching younger, more diverse demographics. And we credit some of that to this. There's a bunch of other things that we do too, right? Like we're still active in the Pride community. We still do our regular marketing. But I do think that it's working because it's showing that like wine is for me too.
Yeah,
And I think that's a big problem the wine industry has had, is that it's been exclusive. And exclusivity is cool when you're right up the street in your $300 Napa cab, but exclusivity can't mean that you're not invited into our club. And so I
sure.
think that we have taken for the last 5 years such a strong position on being inclusive. And I think that this WNBA just shows that even more, that like
Mhm.
we want everybody at our table. And not only can we just talk about it or say we're the sponsor, but we also have to show it. And so if you like all of our new WNBA visuals, they show young, diverse folks drinking wine in beautiful urban atmospheres. And like, yeah, like you don't have to be in your sundress and white and in a vineyard to drink a glass of wine. Like
Yeah, yeah,
you can be on a rooftop partying with your very rad friends and enjoying wine. And so I think we're showing them that wine is inclusive. So you no longer can just talk. And I think that's doing our part in DE&I, which is a hot topic right now, but we're not backing down. Like it matters at every level. It does, right? And wine has to stay inclusive. Like
yeah,
it just has to. I think you saw that wonderful Dr. Monique Bell, that professor from Fresno who
uh-huh,
studies marketing and reaching diverse audiences. We just had
yeah,
her speak last week, and we got a nice like props from her at the beginning of her coming in to speak to our diversity and equity group, about 35 of us, and that felt great. She's like, "You guys are doing the work," and we're like, "Okay,
nice.
good," because we want to
Yeah,
feel like we're doing the work.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah.
So, and you mentioned the generational audiences as well, with some opportunities around older millennials and younger millennials. Tell me about Gen X. Are you finding that that is a stronghold for the La Crema brand? And is that growing or shrinking? And what other generational cohorts are you finding success with?
Yeah, that's a good question. We were talking about Gen X this morning with Kantar, because we see a little slipping for us for a moment. It's always a moment in time. And I think part of that slipping is actually some price increases that we've had. And that right now people are feeling price pressure at the grocery store. And we have raised price just due to some short vintages and harvests. And I think that that generation is shopping a lot based on the value that they're given. And so making sure that we are still providing value. But I think it's constantly working with the generations, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think so. Gen X is definitely shifting to shop online along with other generations. So how do you make sure that you meet them there? They know a lot about wine. So when they go online and they search for Pinot Noir or Chardonnay, making sure that your wines still show up, because in those spaces now you can just not show up, right, if somebody's
Yeah.
looking for your wine. And so I think we have to be sensitive for everybody that we're showing up still. I think Gen X is a big part of the event strategy that we do. So like
Mhm.
being at the Cincinnati Open, being at the Charleston Open, these kind of higher end sporting events, I think we see a lot of Gen X folks that are attending those events for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like we're putting our toe in TikTok right now, and that's like our Gen Z focus, and we still have a lot of success with Facebook, which is our Gen X focus, and then our
Yeah.
millennial is still very active in Instagram, and so like, and we slightly modify our messages depending on those mediums, right?
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I think we think about them all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting because I think that there's, like for every brand there is a generational win no matter which generation you're talking about. It's just figuring out like what is the right messaging strategy and is the product a right fit for that particular audience and their disposable income, what have you. So it's fascinating. I know you have so much data. One data point that I saw you present on was from Numerator, and La Crema's own brand data on that platform showed that 69% of La Crema buyers in the past year were new to the brand, which I thought was incredible. Um, and 14% were new to wine altogether, meaning that La Crema was bringing new people to the wine category through its various activations. So, tell me a little bit about, what these numbers tell you and tell you about La Crema's role in expanding wine's consumer base.
Yeah. Thank you for listening to my presentation. And I used those numbers for hope and optimism, right? I talk about ourselves, but I'm usually using it so people understand like, hey, new people are coming in. So Numerator, just so people understand the data source, it's receipt data. It's actually, I can see what households purchase and what they're buying and when they buy it. And then I track them year on year, I actually look at it quarterly. And for La Crema, the 14% in the last year that we brought in that are new to wine. So that means, right, on their receipts, we've never seen them buy wine for any brands in the past. To me, that's the biggest win right now. Is just bringing people into the wine category. And we can see that they're young and we can see that they're diverse. And so it tells me to keep going with the marketing that we're doing, right? I
Yeah.
use that information when I have to go in and ask for dollars. I use that information to help me keep those dollars coming in because we have to keep those new people coming in. And so that's like in the last 52 weeks, they're new to wine. And so I think that is something that I find so much value in, and I pulse it every quarter. I look at Kendall Jackson and I look at La Crema and I look at how are folks coming in? Are they new? Are we talking to them? And then what do they look like? How much spend do they have? What else are they buying? And so I think, yeah, I think the Numerator data along with, we look at, and I'm trying to think of how Circana calls it, but they talk about folks that are new into the category versus who we're losing. And we look at that for total wine, and then we look at that by variety. And
Yeah.
so we look at, are people coming into the wine category, and who are we losing out of the wine category?
Mm-hmm.
The hopeful, so there's always like positive and negative in each number. The hopeful for wine right now is in the teens, we're bringing in new people. And I don't have the exact stat in front of me, but I believe that it's like 14 to 17% of new people in the last 52 weeks are coming into wine. And this is Circana. It's like the entire United States. It's very, very in-depth data. But we're losing 2% more than that.
Oh,
So we call it it's a leaky bucket. Some varieties are 6%, some varieties are 4%, some are 2%. So we're gaining people in wine. So good job, all the wine people doing the work. That's the positive. The negative is we're losing more people. So is that people that are moderating? Is that everybody that's on Ozempic and not drinking as much anymore? Is that people going to mushroom beverages? Is that people switching to more functional things? So the leaky bucket is the problem right now. And you can look at that, at all kinds of levels and then say, okay, here's what I want to target. I want to target the places where new people are still coming in and then try to keep them from leaving and lapsing.
Yeah.
Right? And so that's kind of, Numerator is a small targeted tool we use for our brands, but like Circana, IRI, that group, we use that on a macro scale just to see like, well, what are these losses? Because man, those big red numbers hurt. But when you break them down, they become not as insurmountable.
Yeah. Are there any other insights that you've seen from those big data sets that kind of give you some idea of what's happening with consumer behaviors? Any other data points to pull out there?
Yeah, I mean, I alluded to some of them, like moderation is a big one, moderation, health, and wellness. And I have been yelling for years about this one, and then now it's happening. And there's a little I told you so, even particularly in my own organization, which is wine took way too much time to tell people what is in the bottle.
Yeah, for sure. I agree
We
with that.
don't say anything, and we assume people know and trust that it's just grapes. And I think we have done ourselves a disservice over the years because they have been telling us, our drinkers, for 5, 6, 7 years that they want to know what's in that bottle, and we haven't told them. And so I think that is a big one for me of we need to start. I mean, I even started putting 100% Santa Barbara grapes on my label. Like,
Yeah,
just so people know, it's just grapes. It's
totally.
just grapes. Sometimes yeast, maybe a little tartaric acid, right? Maybe a little SO2, but like what's happened in that meantime is every other beverage tells them everything that's in the package, even water.
Yeah,
Says gluten-free
exactly.
on it, right?
Every CPG category says what's in the bottle. I think it's just like that catch up. Like the wine has to catch up. This is
Yeah.
what consumers have come to expect across all categories.
Yep. And we're not doing it fast enough. And so however we need to do it quickly. Like, and we have to do it swiftly because there are, I will not name names. There are imposters in the wine space and in the beverage alcohol space that are telling young drinkers that there are all these things in wine.
Yeah.
And they're the only ones talking about it. And so people believe it and they have millions of dollars. And so we have to make sure that we counter that with facts for sure. And, there's one I heard the other day. It says in California, 75 additives are allowed in wine. And basically the statement was saying, and so therefore there are 75 things in that glass of wine.
Yeah, exactly.
And if I am health and wellness driven, which most people are these days, right? That's scary. And I can't pick up that bottle and I can't find out what's in it. And so I'm probably going to turn away. And so I think, for the industry, like we maybe need to work harder with our retailers. We need to work harder with our restaurants. Maybe we need to start putting things on restaurant menus. Maybe in wine sections, we need to like explain, the process of wine. And even wines that have like a higher sugar content, it sounds scary, but when you actually break it down, it's like a teaspoon and a half of sugar in an entire bottle of wine. It's not
Right.
even that much sugar, but there's advertisers showing cups of sugar being poured in wine glasses, and they're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars showing that.
Oh yes, I have seen those ads.
Yeah. And so we got to get, I think we've just got to get more fierce about it and just be honest. We just have to be
Yeah.
honest. And I think that all falls under that moderation, but also that health and wellness mentality. And people want to know what they put in their body, what's it going to do for them.
Right.
And that's a challenge for wine because we can't talk about pleasure and joy and socialization. And, we can't talk about that stuff. And we should.
Yeah, yeah. It is a challenge because, almost every other brand is out there, outside of alcohol containing products are marketing on their functional benefits. And it really is a challenge, I think,
Yeah.
for wine and spirits because it's just something that customers are becoming accustomed to of, this vibe based marketing of it's calming or relaxing or like social, like, so, I see so much about like these social tonics out there, which
Ugh.
is
Or like, what did I see the other day? Like, oh, performance enhancing?
oh right, and yeah, exactly.
Come on.
Yes, there's a lot of stuff out there, and yeah, performance enhancing, and this is water. Okay, well,
Right.
all right then.
Yeah.
Um, well, let's talk a little bit about kind of on the more tactical side. I was curious to talk to you about social media and what's working these days to attract and engage customers across various channels.
Yeah. Yeah, I think for your audiences and audiences that are trying to figure things out right now, like getting your followers is no longer as important, right? So don't spend your dollars just trying to get numbers and followers onto your pages. It's more about the content that you then put some dollars behind and put out in front of people in the right moments, people that are interested in what you're offering. So I think that shift in that mentality. I think what I alluded to with influencers, I think using influencers in a very strategic way is really important. So what we've found is it's not necessarily the big influencers and it's not the small guys, it's the middle, it's the in between. It's the folks that have smaller audiences that trust them to give them messages that are authentic. And so kind of look for influencers in those mid ranges. And there are multiple tools you can use to like look at influencers and their reach and, negotiate rates and all of that. But I do think there's value in that still for sure, because you can't get your own message out on your own. I think, like I said, making sure that your identity is very cohesive online, that no matter where somebody looks at you, they see you being a similar type of a brand. We talked about this a lot on Tuesday, which is with AI being used more often as a search tool. You need to make sure that you have your earned media, your owned media, that other people are talking about you, that you're talking about you, that you have reviews. All of that is now going to be consolidated by AI when somebody asks a question about your wine.
Wow, that is a new thing that I think many brands have not yet considered.
It's exhausting. It's going to be exhausting. And so it's just making sure that you have to do all of it, right? That you don't stop doing the things, like, just because we're saying things are going to go in this direction doesn't mean you can stop trying to get reviews on sites where they have reviews, or that just because this AI is coming, you don't need to work with traditional wine journalists anymore. Yeah, you do. You have to do all of it, because all of that now is going to be consolidated to get answers, right?
Wow.
And it's going your presentation, your identity on the internet will be scrubbed in those ways. And you can look at it as positive, right? It doesn't have to be a negative thing, but just you have to make sure that things are tight. And maybe that's an argument. I'm just working my way through this too, because we're still working through these new AI tools, like to have less wines and be more focused so that you can ensure that the things you have are very clean and tidy, versus trying to be a bunch of things, particularly if you're new and you're, up and coming. I think that's probably a better strategy than try to be so many things.
Yeah.
Where you can't have enough earned media behind it to mean anything. And then we've been working, I mean, we just had an incredible partnership on, to your point about what's working in digital, an incredible partnership with DoorDash. And so DoorDash is also a sponsor of the NBA and the WNBA. And so we spent money with them to promote DoorDash during finals for the WNBA and finals for the NBA. And we matched dollars. So we put together this combo, get your La Crema wine during the WNBA finals and order your food through DoorDash. And we had incredible results. And I think that stuff's really fun. So like you don't always have to do your digital spend on your own. You can find like partners to work with that are willing to work. And to your point, test and learn. Like it's test and learn. Another beautiful thing about wine with its value, it's got a high basket ring. So like
Yeah.
everybody wants to sell more wine. Like, of course they want to sell more wine. And so rather than going and be like, oh, wine's down, you don't want to work with me, it'd be like, hey, you make a lot of money when you sell wine. Let's try to sell more wine together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, all right. So let's say that we have a small brand, like at the 10,000 case level. Um, you know, what advice can you share with smaller producers to think strategically to help build sales in the coming year? Do you have any thoughts about what might work?
Yeah. I do. I have thoughts because I've done it. I think that it comes back to that target markets. So really figuring out one, if you do want to go into 3 tier, you do not need to be national. And so where can you find markets with distributors and or importers, depending on what you are, that like small to medium sized brands and want to build them with you and build in those markets versus this, oh my gosh, I have to do it everywhere. And then when you find your partner, your distribution partner, getting in those places and building those relationships, being present, doing the tastings, doing the events, like that part is really important. And then it sounds so simple, but everybody misses on this one is just data capture.
Yeah.
Anyone you talk to, get their email address. Every single person, right? Get their email address, connect with them on social. Then you start a relationship that you can then nurture. But if you stand behind the table, you meet this person, they think you and your wines are the coolest thing ever, but then they walk off and they can't find you in retail yet, right? And they're busy.
Yeah.
You've kind of lost them. And so I think that building that data capture into the process naturally and organically, and then cultivating is that part is super important. You can also then feed those people into the back end of your social media system so you can target them when you're having a discount for a 4th of July holiday or whatever. Like you've got to learn that you need to connect and then you need to follow through with them. And then two, what can you do with your retail partners? Like most retail partners have really great e-commerce databases. So how do you partner with them to promote your brands and tell your story? I think that's super important.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I think it can it just can seem, if you try to take on the whole market, it can seem very overwhelming. And even I, with like some big national brands, sometimes we get down to 5 states and that's all we talk about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like here's where we're under indexing. Let's do these things in these markets and then we kind of go after it. And it's often grassroots. I mean, I think wine is kind of grassroots, right? Like no matter how hard we push to say everybody's going to buy on DTC, just like they buy clothes and retail's all going out of business, and they're not buying all their wine online because they
Yeah. Yeah.
still want to touch it, feel it, taste it, meet somebody, talk to somebody. And so it is still like grassroots in that way, I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does that
Definitely.
help at all?
Yeah, for sure. And I think also just as a follow-up to that, I also have gotten some questions from brands who are thinking about, appearing and like bringing their wines to events. but having trouble identifying like what type of event partner or what type of category is a good thing for them to target. So I was curious, just as a bit of a follow up, how you determined, like La Crema is, we're going to go after the upscale sporting events, the upscale art events, the LGBTQ plus audience. How did you determine that those were the right types of audiences and eventually event partnerships to go forth with?
Yeah. Um, I cannot tell you the thousands of events that I have looked at around the country.
I bet.
And I wish I could just share the list with the entire wine industry and be like, hey, we didn't take these, 4,000, but you should go after them. So I think ticket price is important. Are people paying to come in? Are they paying to be there, right? Is there that level of entry? Then you look at, are there other beverage alcohol being drunk there, and do they have sales of those things? So do they have bars existing where they sell wine, beer, spirits? Like, are people having a beverage alcohol moment when they're there? They'll always tell you those facts, right? They can always tell you, yeah, 2 years ago I sold 300 cases of wine, but I didn't have a sponsor. I just sold it. Then you're like, oh, wow. So you're already selling 300 cases of wine. What if I came in, I got that placement, and I was the sponsor and did some sort of tasting activation? It's where beer and spirits win all the time, right? All the time, because they have a
Yeah.
lot of money, but you don't have to have the money, really. And so you look at other beverage alcohol, is it happening in that moment? And then, look on their social media, do a little digital digging and hunting to see, who's engaging and how are they engaging. And I just think reach out and ask. So what happened post COVID? Every events, shuttered. We came out of COVID. The sponsorship fees that were being asked of events were unbelievable. Like, so many of the events we used to do in the past, I'm like, I'm out. I can't afford that anymore. It's going
Yeah.
down. It's going down again. So it's normalizing. So you always have a chance to get in, and then you can always negotiate, right? And so say you've identified the markets that you want to focus on, then start looking at some events that you can sponsor. How can you connect with people at those events, right? Sometimes going there or sending a trusted team is very important. It's very important who's behind the table. So in some states, it has to be the caterer, but you can be with the caterer. And so you being there too to make that connection, I think, is very important versus just handing off your brand to a catering company. I think even smaller events, like, I'm trying not to like throw out names in specific. Sorry, Erica. I'm
Yeah,
being
yeah,
very
no
vague,
worries.
but like, there's so many things that we've looked at, right? And we're doing events. I don't know. We probably are doing 5 to 10 events a week for
Oh,
Jacksonville Wine.
wow. That's a
Mm-hmm.
huge number of
Mm-hmm.
activations.
Yeah,
Um,
for the whole company, all over
yeah,
the country and the world. It's like we know the value of big and
yeah,
small events. Yeah.
yeah, that's amazing. Well, tell me what's next for La Crema this year? What's coming down the pipeline?
Ooh, what is coming down the pipeline? Well, we just got Winery of the Year from Wine
Yes, that
Enthusiasts.
is congratulations.
And so we found that out in November. We launched that in December. And my team is spending the next year getting that message out. And so that's an overlay with what we're doing with WMBA and with our tour. But I think Winery of the Year is very important, because if we can seed in people's mind this award and this moment, that can last a really long time. So I'm just trying to make sure that people know La Crema got this recognition. Here are the reasons that we got it, and that it will stick. And I think the awards like that, if you make them loud and sticky, can last for a long time. I always tell my marketing teams, it only matters if you make it matter, right? Like, sometimes it's
True,
just the
true.
wine industry talking to itself. Same with scores. But if you get it out to the right people in the right moment, you can seed something bigger. So I think for our next year, it's really getting that out. So we're doing tours across multiple cities around the United States. We are meeting and hosting events. We're picking our top wine club folks. We're traveling to their cities and we're throwing parties for them with their Winery of the Year with all their friends. So they
Nice.
bring in a caterer. We bring the wines, and we're throwing a house party, and it's a La Crema Winery of the Year house party for our top end folks. Yeah, we've got a lot. We just did it, which I feel really good about for the wine industry right now. A huge partnership with the New York Times, and we're talking about La Crema. We started that in December. That goes through the end of March. We're sponsoring a bunch of their podcasts. We're doing print ads in their style issue in the Sunday paper. So we really like and trust that media outlet, and so we're working with them. And then we're going to be in the Oscar issue for People Magazine, La Crema. So that's a
I
big
love
one.
that because you're like meeting people where they're at, you know? It doesn't have to just be so wine focused. Like get out of the wine sphere, go on the,
Right.
advertise on those podcasts that are just more general interest. Like that type of thing, I think, sometimes can be overlooked.
Yeah.
All right. So lastly, let's say that a drinks entrepreneur asks you for advice. It could be a person, a book, it could be an industry group, who would you recommend to provide the greatest source of business insights and why?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, there's a lot. And I got to think about this one for a minute. But for me, where I learned so much at the beginning of my career was my vintners associations. So I got involved in the Napa Valley Vintners as fast as I could. Got at a seat at the table, worked with the Sonoma County Vintners. Like I just made sure that I was connecting with the folks that were already doing it. And I was listening and I was asking questions. And then before I knew it, I had seats and I was working on committees and like actually building real things. So I think that community side of the drinks business is one the most rewarding, but also can be the most valuable part, right? Of like knowing there's a bunch of people too. And there's this thing in the wine business that I tell people why I love it, which is there's this like sporting competitiveness. Like we all want to be the best, right? And we're competitive, and like that's the fun part. And so get in it so you feel that, because it's huge, right? And it's so competitive. There aren't many industries that like have what's the TTB? 110,000 wines were approved last year. Like that's pretty competitive. So
Totally.
so you need to get in there with your peers. So I love the Vintners Association side of things. I do love like that Vine Pair, what they're doing. People like you, like who are having these real conversations with all kinds of people in the business and just listening and learning. Yeah, I think when I talk to a lot of like younger women's groups and stuff, and I often say like network, you got to network. And in their mind, it's finding beverage professionals on LinkedIn and connecting that way. And I'm like, no. Like really network. You have to get out there. You have to be at events. You have to be uncomfortable. You need to be shaking hands. You need to be saying, hey, can we meet for a glass of wine? Like that is how this business works. It's why it thrives. It's why we all almost shriveled up and died during COVID when we couldn't actually network and be together. And so I think that is a big part of it. Right now, I would say stay away from some of these news consolidation newsletters because they're depressing. I mean, I need them because I need to know the facts. But like, if you're just getting in and you're trying to stay motivated, go your own way. Like, go your own way with some peers. But like, some of the macro news roundups it's just too much right now. I don't think it's productive. I don't even encourage my younger employees anymore to follow that stuff right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's all amazing advice. And I especially love the tip about being uncomfortable and going and just meeting people and doing things IRL, because it does make such a huge difference, especially if you're trying to get a foothold or grow a brand or launch a brand or whatever it is. So thank you so much for sharing your insights, Shilah. It's been such a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Yeah, what a treat. And I'm glad we finally got to speak. And thank you for the really good, provocative questions. I feel like you're a part of this keeping this industry going together with me. So I appreciate all the people that are doing this, right? We're not giving up. We've dedicated too much of our life.
Exactly. We're not giving up. And on that note, thanks again.
Yeah. Bye.
Welcome back to Last Call. I'm Caroline Lamb, joined by Scott and Erica today, and we are answering a listener question. So the question is, should a mid-sized wine distributor who has not taken a strong position on non-alcoholic wines or alternatives get on the bandwagon now or stay true to what they've always done, which is selling just fine wine? Um, who wants to kick us off?
I'll dive in, right? The question I think anyone who has a portfolio, be it an importer or distributor, needs to ask is why, right? Why am I doing this? And the reason I start with that question is you need to take a very measured approach when adding something so distinctively different from what you're typically used to selling. To give you some context here, non-alc adult beverages um, are about 1%. This is according to Nielsen IQ and IWSR. They are about 1% of the sales of alcoholic beverages. So if the idea is to add non-alc to your portfolio to expect a tremendous return, um, it might not shift the nature of your business in the way that you anticipate.
I think that's a great perspective. And I also do think that there's an opportunity. So we know that it's only 1% of sales volume in comparison to alcoholic beverages. But I do think that there's a real benefit to accounts, whether they're retail accounts or on premise accounts, to having a broader mix within a set. So we know, some restaurants and retailers are going to be wanting to source these adult non-alcoholic beverages, and it's quite challenging right now in the non-alcoholic space to find distributors who are just dedicated to those non-alcoholic products and to onboard them. It's very fragmented. So I think it's actually an opportunity for some of these distributors to add incremental sales if they have like just a nice little segment of a couple top selling non-alcoholic products. And I think it's not just non-alcoholic products. I think there's also opportunity for THC products, because in looking at the distributor space, and I advise both non-alcoholic companies and THC companies, and I can't tell you how many times a week or a month people are asking me for advice on which distributor should I work with in which states. And it is really, really fragmented. So a lot of THC companies I know are now just doing self distribution because it's just not a consistent landscape out there. So I think there is opportunity for non-alcoholic products, including THC, to be better represented by uh, legacy distributors, and that is something that I selfishly would love to see, because I find it really challenging to give answers to the people that are asking questions.
So, from my perspective, as someone who's on the street as a sales rep about 40% of my time, um, I look at it as okay, let's say I have 50 accounts in my territory and 10% of them are interested in. I was looking at this as non alcoholic wine in particular or alternatives. But let's say 10% are interested, so 5 accounts. And even if those are really good, solid accounts, like $100,000 accounts, if the number that Scott says it's makes up maybe 1% of the sales, let's say it could go up to 10% in this sense, that's only moving the needle like $1,000 to $10,000 in each of those accounts, which is not nothing, but is not huge either. So I think that at the distributor level, you have to consider if you have, sometimes it can feel like when you just have a few people asking, it feels like a bigger demand than it is. So you have to just sense if there's a real demand and plan how you're going to get it to market, because otherwise it could easily become a situation where you do it because you should, and then you have some inventory in your warehouse that isn't moving the way that you would like to see it, and then 3 years down the line you have a huge surplus, and that's not what you were looking to do. So I think it's just having a plan and really feeling out your specific customers, because it's hard to say.
A plan is key, right? We all know distributors that specialize in a certain category or geography, and and those that don't. That distributor that has the one Pinot Grigio from northern Italy, but they don't have an Italian portfolio, and by comparison, it typically suffers. So if you're considering adding a non-alc brand, you either need to go all in or avoid it, right? You're not going to make a splash by picking up one SKU or one producer and having people take you seriously. Buyers sense disingenuous wholesalers, and if you're really thinking about building, two, three, four producers and telling a story, you might stand a chance and really benefit. But if it's just adding, a brand, and buyers will sense that.
Definitely. Great points all around.
That is all we have time for today. So thanks again for joining us on the Business of Drinks. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you are listening, and tap the notification button so you'll be the first to know when we drop a new episode. Please help us spread the word. Click the star ratings and please share on social. It really helps us find new listeners. And if you have anything that you would like us to cover on the show, please reach out at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or on our social channels.